Hello and welcome to the third episode in like a week that we've recorded of the Employee Handbook and HR podcast by two lawyers featuring attorneys Arta and Ryan Ellis. And speaking of, here's Ryan Ellis.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be part of this 2026 podcast reform movement we are making. Don't know what that means, but it sounded good.
Yeah, I think that's very dramatic. I like it. I think that's what people want. That they like outrage, they like drama. That's what we got to give them. That's what I've learned from Googling ways to make millions on a podcast. Um,
Oh,
so
I have a quote for this. What I said was not just dramatic, it was also provocative. It gets the people going.
Oh, that's right. Nobody knows what this means, but it's provocative. So we want to talk about how we were basically gifted with manna from heaven recently because we were looking for topics and we never know what we're going to talk about until 3 minutes before. And today we were Googling around and we found this article on SHRM, the HR organization that does all the certifications and puts on all these conventions and stuff about HR every year and tries to be like the leading HR company, even though they're not a professional organization.
Just to add, SHRM is the Society for Human Resources Management. It is the world's largest professional organization for HR professionals. It offers resources, networking, research, advocacy, and it offers also certifications, the SHRM CP and the SHRM SCP, to advance the HR field. So it is a world leading, clearly I didn't write that, it was a Google response, but now my actual response is it is an industry leading juggernaut of HR. And I say that I have presented for SHRM in the past. They hold enormous conventions around the country and maybe around the world. It is huge. I mean, they have a keynote speaking room that holds probably 10 to 15,000 people. It is huge. So I'm saying all of this to let everybody know how big SHRM is if you don't have any idea what it is.
Yeah,
So
to give you some context. And yeah, and it's all bullshit. Nothing is real. This is just a company that has fashioned itself. Well, you know what? In this is all my opinion, of course, so don't sue me. But this is a company that's taken it upon itself to declare themselves the HR standard in America and the world. And so it's just a delicious irony, a delicious, satisfying irony that they just got hit with a $11.5 million verdict for racial discrimination against one of their employees.
yeah,
Uh,
an HR company getting, I mean, I like SHRM because I present for them and it's a lot of fun to do that. So asterisk that. And if they're listening or anybody is listening, that I would like to come back and present again. But um, the whole, like Arta said, irony here is the world's largest HR organization that provides HR training to HR professionals, who writes the certification exams and provides certification for people that are accepted in the industry if you're applying for an HR job, who publishes the best practices and how to do things, just as we'll explain today, just forgot everything that it knew and had a moment that is reflected in an $11.5 million verdict, 10 of that being punitive damages for racial and discrimination, race discrimination.
and retaliation.
And we'll tell you to make it.
Yeah, well, I want to give a little context on that $11.5 million number. It it should have never gotten there. They should have settled this a long time before. And I think the verdict is kind of a reflection of how stubborn they were and how stupid they were just throughout the whole process. Botching investigation, botching the trial, botching attempts to settle the case, just botching everything.
Yeah, let me shed some light onto that. I agree with Arta from a plaintiff's perspective. That's how it looks, but I personally embody that remark of being stubborn to settle, um, only because a lot of times when you are faced with a case that you might not think is legitimate, and you might think you can get a good jury to make to give you a few votes to not make this a verdict against you, that the demands are too high. So like again, not saying it's right because the verdict obviously reflects what happened, but in cases like this, the settlement offer from plaintiff might have been $5 million, which again, in hindsight, perfect, great idea, pay the 5 million and run away. But at the time when your attorneys, who here they have very good attorneys, Littler Mendelson, Very good attorneys. I'm sure they did a great job. But when their attorneys are telling them, look, you have a valid chance here to beat this, given the facts, as we'll go over later, that they don't want to pay something like that. So I agree that this absolutely should have been settled. But just letting the people out there know, if they've never been part of a lawsuit, that sometimes that settlement, despite being wanted by both sides, has unrealistic expectations as to what that could meet at in the middle.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's hard to put yourself in someone else's shoes in a case like this and then criticize. Well, actually, it's easy to do
No,
that.
it's
It's
very
easy to
easy.
criticize them after. Yeah, it's very difficult to be there at the time trying to make a decision on what the best thing to do is because so much of the information doesn't come to light until afterwards.
Yeah, and
Um,
I'm willing to bet too, sorry to cut you off again. I'm willing to bet that if we called the attorneys, um, for either side and they expected a verdict, like realistically expected a verdict for greater than a couple $1,000,000, I think they would have both been surprised. Um, Again, your plaintiff's attorney would tell you they absolutely expected this, and it was absolutely gonna be this, and it's a travesty that it's only 11.5 million, but a defense attorney would give you a, like, "No, this should have been X," much lower than the 11.5. So, agreed, I agree.
well, let's give some perspective here. The median federal discrimination lawsuit, I think the verdict was 150 grand. So this is quite a bit more than I think jury here is obviously trying to make a point to SHRM and use them as an example, which you're not really supposed to do. But anyway, that's what happened. And we're gonna now get into the details of the case. But just to give you some more fun context on SHRM, this I think the incidents first started in like 2016 that were covered in the lawsuit. But just to give some perspective, on this business, even though they're growing, they're doing very well financially, it seems. Um, September 11th, 2025, after 9/11 commemoration remarks with 75 employees present, a Marilyn Monroe impersonator sang a sultry happy birthday performance for an executive, which is really weird. And they also have an attendance policy now that they've started. And these are all just kind of like backstabby articles or things, gossip that was fed to Business Insider and stuff like that. But it's fun to read anyway. So if you're 1 minute late, you must go to security and check in and get escorted back to your desk by an executive, which that doesn't sound like a good idea. Um, Anyway, so they've had a lot of layoffs recently as well, and they have a lot of people coming out of the woodwork to make all these comments about how they're so bad, and they're a fear-based work culture and all this kind of stuff. So let's get into the actual complaint and find out, is it a fear-based work culture that retaliates and discriminates against their employees? And just a spoiler here, they do.
We kinda gave away the ending, starting out, but yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Okay, so we're gonna stop here and then start again with part two, where we will start with the complaint. We'll be right back.
Ba-dum bum, ba-dum bum.
And we're back. Let's get right into it. The case is called Muhammad versus Society for Human Resource Management. It's a U.S. District Court case out of Colorado. Verdict date was December 5th for 11.5 million. Main claims were racial discrimination and retaliation. So just to give you a little bit of background, again, this is the world's largest HR organization is the defendant, the one that trains HR professionals, writes the certification exams, publishes best practices, takes all your money so you can get a little thing that says you're a member of SHRM. And they're being sued, or they were being sued by a 34-year-old Egyptian Arab woman named Rehab Mohammed. She was hired by SHRM in April 2016 to do product specialist work and promoted twice. Solid performer, role model, which was on her performance reviews, and a remote employee based in Denver. So yeah, from there, Ryan, you want to kind of give a little bit more background here?
Yeah, so a plaintiff, Miss Mohammed, was terminated in September of 2020, which interestingly was 8 months after her last promotion. But moving to, and we'll talk about that in a minute, moving to SHRM, as Arta said, they're the world's largest HR organization, just shy under 350,000 members, headquartered in Virginia. They administer the certifications we spoke about earlier and publish those best practices. I'd like to note that sometimes plaintiffs, when they file complaints, put kind of the kitchen sink in there, alleging everything they can to make it look good. Here, the first line of the complaint, or the first few lines of the complaint under the caption, where it identifies the parties in the court, the first few lines is a quote that plaintiff put in there from SHRM's CEO, Johnny Taylor Jr., regarding how to dismantle racism. And it says that SHRM literally sells courses on how to conduct workplace investigations. And they published articles titled "How to Defend Retaliation Claims." It just became a case study on how not to do that. That's not the quote. That's just my comment. So interestingly, the complaint contains this quote from Johnny Taylor Jr., the president and CEO of SHRM, and it's just out there in the front of the complaint. First thing the complaint says is this quote: "Workplace bias and racial inequity bloom in the dark. If we continue to be silent, unable to speak candidly about our uncomfortable experiences and those of others, nothing will change, and businesses will pay the price." That is literally a quote, and again, I haven't verified the quote. It's in the complaint, but that's a quote from the president and CEO of SHRM, which again is hilarious to me because if that is true, which again I'm going to assume, because an attorney put it in there, end up pleading under the penalty of perjury or is subject to a federal rule 11, which requires that we don't lie to courts. If that's true, then it's just pretty funny to start the case with that quote of essentially, sure, the business is going to pay the price.
Let's see. Well,
So,
let's start. Oh, how do we start this out? Okay, so we want to talk about what happened here, the alleged discrimination that happened.
well, before we do that, let's go into like a couple of the people that we're going to mention here in as we discuss it. There's a person, Carolyn Barley, who is plaintiff's white supervisor, accused of giving a separate treatment, and we'll go through that to white employees. There's an Ebony Thompson, who is a black senior instructional designer who allegedly also mistreated, excuse me, who was also allegedly mistreated by Miss Barley, who was terminated 17 days after complaining about her issues with Miss Barley. There's a Carrie Mills, who is a white senior instructional designer. Um, who was, I guess, I'm assuming from what we've read, was called by the plaintiff, who testified at trial that she was never disciplined for missing deadlines, foreshadowing that our plaintiff did and was disciplined. There was a Mike Jackson, who was the HR investigator who unfortunately got called out and allegedly, again, I wasn't there, so I'm just repeating what we've read, who allegedly had never conducted a discrimination investigation before. And then there's our CEO, Johnny Taylor Jr., who testified he played no role in that termination of the plaintiff. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Just want to give people some kind of a foresight of who the people are and kind of why it matters.
I think that's important to do because there's a lot of stuff going on here. So basically, Miss Muhammad was sensing, I guess, just disparate treatment and some.
I'll jump in on you there. It all started when Miss Muhammad was promoted in January of 2020 when she got a new supervisor, Miss Barley. Miss Barley, as we said earlier, is white. And according to Miss Muhammad's complaint, Miss Barley treated her differently than the white colleagues. For example, like plaintiff was required to ghostwrite emails for Miss Barley just to sign and send off. But with the white colleagues, they communicated directly with vendors and stakeholders. So allegedly, again, Ms. Barley trusted the white colleagues to communicate with vendors and stakeholders, but didn't trust Miss Muhammad. Another example given is that Miss Muhammad was required to copy Miss Barley on all of the vendor communications when the white colleagues didn't have to. They had no oversight and operated independently. Another example, Miss Barley allegedly took credit for Miss Muhammad's work when the white colleagues actually received recognition for what they did. So it was like it seems like a white I guess preferenced contribution recognition protocol that was put into place or was in place. I don't know.
Well,
Uh,
that doesn't sound like at this point, it doesn't sound like $11.5 million. So the important thing here, and for the lessons to be learned from the listeners, is how SHRM just screws up every single step. So you have some testimony here. That's the strongest evidence that this other lady who had a similar job or the same job as Muhammad, the Carrie Mills, testifying that she didn't have any of these limitations put on her work or qualifications of her work being done by the boss, Carolyn Barley. Okay, so again, we have Muhammad's strongest evidence of this discrimination is testimony from another employee, Carrie Mills, that basically had the same job as her and was treated very differently than Miss Muhammad.
why does that matter?
Well, this is how we prove discrimination. Miss Mills was white. and Miss Muhammad is Egyptian. So we have a white versus brown situation here. We also have a potential religious situation here that could be inferred, even though that wasn't part of the discrimination complaint. But Mills testified, I guess, that she unilaterally extended her own deadlines without any consequences, that she received stress accommodations, that she testified she was never disciplined or coached for missing deadlines. And on the morning that Muhammad was fired, the supervisor Barley sent Miss Mills a congratulatory email for completing a project that was still incomplete.
Yeah, that
So
that's hilarious. That's
same job title, same supervisor, same organization, but very different rules. But again, I don't think this adds up to anywhere near $11.5 million at this point. So we're going to go through the complaint here and see where they screwed up and cost themselves all this money, because they could have got out of this for like 100 grand.
Well, before we get there, do you think, like, just from you personally, that there's anything that could have happened in this kind of context that you think would justify an $11.5 million verdict?
No, I don't even know if I would want to take this case at this point. You know what I mean? This is a case where I'd be like, okay, we're gonna have to get somebody to testify for you, that may or may not want to lose their job, that we might not be able to count on to give the type of testimony when things get difficult, either going to trial or in a deposition that's going to benefit our client. I don't know if I want to just risk my entire case on somebody like Kerry Mills. So at this point, yeah, like I said, it's definitely not worth 11.5 million at this point, and it's definitely not a case that I want to take with these facts. But let's find out a little bit more what happened, and why the jury decided to smack on, or tack on, stack on, tack. I don't know. I can't think today. $10 million of punitives. So let's go through the dates of what happened. Um, Ryan,
This all
why don't
happened.
you start?
Yeah, I'll do it. So in 2020, this all happened in 2020. This chain of escalation. Um, in that apparently Miss Muhammad didn't just complain once and essentially fall on deaf ears, but she escalated her complaints through proper channels, and SHRM's response at each kind of step just became evidence against them because they didn't do the right thing. So starting in June of 2020, Miss Muhammad contacted her vice president, Miss Morris, complaining specifically of race discrimination. And then the next day, um, there was a three-way meeting with Miss Muhammad, Miss Barley, and Miss Morris. Um, and in that meeting, Miss Barley cried, became very defensive, and there was no trained facilitator kind of in that meeting. And there also, more importantly, big mistake number one, there was no HR present at that meeting.
So Ryan, let's just go into that. Why would you want, as a defense attorney, if your client uh told you that they didn't have a HR person present, what would you counsel them? What would you tell them, like, is the problem with that?
Well, the problem is that there has been an explicit complaint of race discrimination, and when that happens, you need to have HR immediately involved and sometimes legal. And so, if there was no HR kind of program, in my opinion, to take this and start investigating, that's a huge problem for SHRM here, because again, this meeting could go anywhere, and maybe the VP, Miss Morris, was trying to quell the issue or kind of contain it in such a way to see what really happened, maybe. But it sounds like with the allegation and specifically of race discrimination that this was not handled at a level that it should have been.
Well, yeah, and it just I never see it as a good idea to have these very emotionally charged meetings before meeting with the people individually. I think that's a huge mistake. I think the Morris, the VP, could add a much better handle on things, and if she would have spoken to them individually first. And I think one thing that I wanted to bring up was that you'd mentioned that there's no trained facilitator there, for these types of um, very emotionally charged meetings. And that's something that, if you're an employer listening and you're like a small business, you don't necessarily have to worry about that. The standards for reasonableness change with the size of your company for what you need to do to solve problems. So, something that's reasonable for a huge company, like bringing in HR staff, bringing in a facilitator who deals with conflict resolution, that's something that a huge company has the resources to afford. So, it'd be more reasonable for them to do that. A small business, let's say you own like a corner store, nobody is expecting you to have a trained facilitator brought in when two of your employees are having issues with each other. But
Yeah.
moving on, I guess June 12th, the next thing that happened is that Barley has a one-on-one meeting with Mohammed. Barley is the boss, and tells
The alleged discriminator here.
yes, and she accuses Muhammad of being wrong and misremembering the situation. This is also just a bad thing by a manager. I think one thing you have to understand as a manager is that it doesn't matter who's wrong or right or whatever. If you get to a point where you can find a resolution with you taking the blame or taking responsibility for something, just do it. The whole point is just to keep the machinery running of the company and not causing more friction. I think if you're the type of person that needs to prove to somebody else that you're right and they're wrong, that's something that's going to hurt you a lot in management. Is going to lead to situations like this.
Yeah, and to add on to that, like, management, just from, like, an objective standpoint, management is supposed to be leading by example. And then calling in as a manager, let's liken it to a military example. If a general calls, one of the people under the general, again, my military reference is already bad now, but it calls them in and yells at them and berates them for something they did wrong. Maybe it wasn't with that. Maybe it's because it didn't teach them right. Maybe the instructions were incorrect. But there has to be because the general's boss will require the general to adopt that. And here, same with again, Barley telling Muhammad or insisting that she is wrong. If Barley has to go up the chain to whoever her boss is, that boss is going to expect Barley to figure it out. And by going in, nothing ever good comes in when a boss comes in, tells someone who complained about them that they're just wrong. It's not, I mean, again, I like to go back to objectiveness and common sense. No common sense would dictate that that response was going to come any other way aside from this getting worse.
Yeah, especially when it comes to subjective things like people's feelings about how they're being treated. If this is it's not legal advice, just normal advice. If you're in a management position and you're not listening and making people feel like what they're saying is heard and validated, then you're gonna have an issue. You're gonna create a seed of resentment. And again, following the law is not always just the bare minimum of what you need to do. Sometimes you have to be understanding of people's situations. So you understand their situation. It's not about right or wrong. If you have a chance to end something by not making a move, that's what I would say to do. Like if you just take the responsibility, take the hit and go. You're the boss. That's part of what being the boss is, or being the manager.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, on behalf of Miss Barley, I mean, I don't think she would have admitted this, but maybe she did, but we didn't read testimony and all that stuff. But this is where Miss Barley should have, I'm sorry, where Miss Barley seems to be defending what she did and protecting herself. And that is a common mistake made by managers because as a manager, you have to assume that your superiors and your company will have your back. If you make a mistake, then you'll be reprimanded for it. And that's just accepting responsibility. But here, going in and telling Mohammed that she's wrong is again, it just makes everything worse. Instead of accepting responsibility and kind of taking it in stride, now she's pointing fingers and making it worse.
Yeah, she's probably at this point where she's gonna get fired herself, and seems to start doubling down. So, June 3rd was the date that this all started. Now it's July 7th. There's a quote unquote facilitated discussion between HR rep Mike Jackson, the aforementioned Mike Jackson with no history of um, conducting discrimination investigations in the workplace. Barley is again a present in the meeting and denies everything. Jackson says he'll follow up. He never followed up. 3 weeks later, about or 2 weeks later, about there's another meeting with the VP Jeannie Morris and Jackson. Mohammed and Thompson both raised discrimination claims. Ebony Thompson, that's the black employee that we talked about earlier, and Thompson describes identical micromanagement compared to Carrie Mills. Uh, microman-
Which should be a humongous red flag for anybody involved. Humongous, because now you have corroboration, and you have a record of now 2 people making the exact same claim about the exact same person.
So the next day, Mohammed decides to take things to the CEO, Johnny Taylor, via his open door policy. And Taylor admits that SHRM is struggling with people manager and diversity issues. Um, and then refers her over to the chief HR officer, Sean Sullivan. Um, in between all of this, on August 6th, Ebony Thompson is terminated 17 days after complaining. On August 10th, Barley suddenly demands a non-negotiable August 31st deadline for two projects from Miss Mohammed, and this was the first time a firm deadline had ever been imposed. Ryan, why is that a problem?
Well, it sounds like that this is like classic setup retaliation. I mean, this is something had to have happened behind closed doors between the July 21st time when Mr. Taylor Jr. said that they're struggling with things and Miss Thompson being terminated to now figuring out how to get rid of plaintiff. I mean, this is where I think I said the setup. This is where like the whole story comes together of like something happened in the background. Now the plan is to get rid of plaintiff here, Miss Mohammed, and this is the first step of putting her, I guess, holding her against deadlines that she either can't meet or whatever. But again, setting her up here, and it's funny because this is the first time that again that SHRM imposed a deadline. So interestingly enough, all these first coming out at times when after a retaliation and discrimination complaint has been made.
Apparently, the next day, August 11th, an internal mediator tells Miss Mohammed, the plaintiff, to change how she interacts with Barley and tells her, "You better finish your projects by the end of the month."
As a plaintiff's attorney, how do you what do you like, are you starting to drool now? Like, this to me seems like where again, it's just getting worse and worse and worse as the time goes by.
Oh yeah, this is salivating time. I think before this deadline, you have a you have a decent case. You have a shaky case. I think Ebony Taylor has a good case at this point for getting fired. 17 days after complaining. But Mohammed, she hadn't been fired at this point. Most attorneys are not taking employment cases unless there's a termination that has already occurred. Um, but this is an obvious way, like you were saying, Ryan, for a company to set up an employee for being fired. It's somebody that you don't like. You just give them an impossible list of tasks under different circumstances where she hasn't just complained recently. Maybe this is something that's in normal business practices, but it certainly looks fishy now.
Agreed. Okay, so I cut you off, but this is where I want because earlier we made a big to do of this isn't a good case, and it seems to me like this is becoming and ramping up to a point of exploding. And I just wanted to get your point as blow by blow as your comments. So yeah, so instead of again, there's nothing here about Barley being reprimanded or talked to, but this is more on the plaintiff side of things. But again, I would assume that not only with this internal mediator telling Miss Muhammad to change how she interacts with Barley, and threatening her to finish her projects or you better finish them. That same kind of tone and communication would go to Barley to say, look, like you can't do this anymore, and give her some guidance as to how she needs to handle herself. A week later, after that meeting happened in August, Muhammad again formally complained of retaliation. Excuse me, because she complained first of race discrimination. So now she, in August of 2020, formally complains of retaliation in a writing, I'm assuming an email to the chief global development officer. And 2 weeks after that, or about 10 days after that, Sullivan sends a letter declaring the complaints unfounded. And again, Sullivan's the investigator.
Ryan, I want to ask you just a little bit of nuance here in general for our listeners. If let's say there is a retaliation claim brought by a plaintiff, but the underlying discrimination claim, let's say somebody complained to their manager being racially discriminated against. There's an investigation done. It turns out that they weren't, and then they're fired. Is that retaliation now because there wasn't discrimination found?
So this is federal law, and if you have a reasonable belief that you experience retaliation, you can make that complaint and cannot be retaliated against for it. I think that federally, I think there's a problem here. I think that there should have been, I mean, a lot more done, first of all. But second of all, because we know, as we said earlier, she's terminated in September. About a day or so after this report comes in, I think that there's obvious a causal nexus between these two things and temporally related. So yeah, I think this is all wrong, all wrong.
Kind of a unethical work life pro tip. Is there like a amount of time you could wait after, let's say somebody complains? Like what do you do as a business owner? Do you just say screw it and like whatever, man? I'm gonna have to just see if they decide to try to sue me.
Well, the problem here is not this is what I fail to understand regarding this lawsuit is that the problem does not seem to be with the plaintiff. The problem does not seem to be with Miss Mohammed because of all the promotions and the glowing performance reviews. So I don't know what needs to be done here except possibly dealing with Miss Barley or their other HR or other professionals who have kind of marked people for termination. Because there's no, I mean, we don't have the report. I mean, I'm sure we can find it, but there's been a protective order issued in the case. So I don't know what we can find or what we can't. But like, there's got to be more here that we're not knowing about.
So
Oh, sorry. Let me answer your question really quick. Your question was, is there a time you can fire somebody? I mean, probably, but not the day after. But again, though, you want to make sure you have legitimate business reasons for doing so. And again, in California, employees can be fired for any reason that's not illegal. You got to make sure that there's no link to that. The plaintiff bringing that lawsuit.
So let's back up a little bit to one of the first screw ups that the company made here, which was with getting this investigator guy, Mike Jackson, to come in and I guess try to investigate what happened. Um, so as a business, why do you want to investigate a claim like this? Why is it in your interest as a business to have HR step in or your general counsel and have somebody come in and investigate to see what happened? Why is that important?
Well, I mean, it's your legal duty to investigate complaints that are, to determine whether they're founded or not. And then the investigation just protects everybody, right? If the investigation is unfounded, then you've done your job. Again, proper investigation. You've done your job as an employer to figure out what's going on at work and to remedy those problems. If it's unfounded, maybe then you can guide the employees who made the complaint or um, give them, I guess, tools to work with, or give them assistance in any way they might need, or even change the change part of their work environment. Maybe they don't want to work with this person anymore. And if again there's legitimate concern but no foul play, maybe that's something you can do. On the other hand of it, though, or other side of it, is if you conduct an investigation, you want to make sure you punish the people that do something. So if you, I mean, crazy example, you never investigate things, then all these problems are going to run rampant in your company, and you don't want that because that puts you in subject to additional legal issues. And this could have gotten way worse. I mean, with social media nowadays, this could have gotten way worse. We have no idea where this could have happened if they didn't seemingly mark plaintiff for termination, according to the facts we know. So, I mean, legal compliance is one, and two is making sure you actually have a workplace where people aren't being harassed all the time.
So, you mentioned dealing with things properly, and I want to just bring it a little bit back to the reasonableness of what your company is expected to do when handling these situations. And this was something that the plaintiff's attorney really bit on in this case. Was Mike Jackson, who was the manager of employee experience, which I had no idea what that means. So he was the one doing the investigation. Now, in a small company, again, the standards for reasonableness on what you need to be doing are going to be lower. You're not going to be expected to hire, an entire team of attorneys to come in and do an investigation if two of your employees are arguing over somebody eating somebody else's lunch. But um, a reasonable response for a huge company like SHRM is going to be sending a seasoned investigator to figure out what happened. In this case, they sent Mike Jackson. Mike was doing the first case he'd ever handled when he was given this this opportunity, which he screwed up royally. He testified that he had one session on HR investigation training, completed just a few months before the events that happened with Miss Muhammad, which is good, I guess, because at least it's fresh, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
I mean,
yeah,
jumped right in just to jump right into field work. I mean, after taking the class.
could have been worse. Could have been like 30 years.
But
Uh,
maybe he testified that he stayed in a Holiday Inn Express last night. So might have made it better.
That would have changed everything. This we wouldn't even been here talking if he would have done that. But he didn't stay at a Holiday Inn Express. I think we can infer that because when asked at trial what he learned during his investigation training, he could not recall any specifics. So that's not good. He also left SHRM in 2021. So this is the person doing the investigation, and why is it not reasonable for somebody with so little experience to be doing this investigation, Ryan? What was the whole point of what I was saying about the reasonableness?
Well, because I think that, I mean, there's a lot of things that are at issue here, but the reason is you need to have someone who knows what they're doing to do the job, especially someone who doesn't necessarily have a bias towards what you're doing here. In this case, moving on to, I guess, not reasonable, but to a bias thing, I guess is unreasonable, is the fact that he wasn't neutral. Like, he was an employee of SHRM, and he was the one investigating these complaints while at the same time he was writing emails for Barley to send to her with deadlines and drafting the paperwork on the same day or 2 days of receiving her complaint. So, there's a lot. Again, I can't get back to the fact, or I can't get over the fact that SHRM did this. Like, the same people teaching you to do things the right way, just massive, massive pickup.
So I think you just kind of glossed over that. Mike Jackson, the investigator, while he was investigating the complaints by Muhammad, simultaneously was ghostwriting emails for Muhammad's supervisor who was being accused of discriminating against Muhammad.
Yep. Yep. It's insane. I mean, that's the thing that the jury can use to infer the investigation was a sham. Like, he did. Like, we don't have all of the details of what they did, but did Jackson not discuss the retaliation complaint with her and his involvement in any of the things he did? Like, if he's the one that drafted the email to say, "Hey, Barley, just send this email with these deadlines, it'll be fine." Like, if he actually said that and that actually happened, that is where we're starting to really get into this punitive slash retaliatory slash malicious and oppressive conduct that justifies punitive damages.
So Ryan, here's the thing. As we know, HR, human resources, it's a minefield. It's very complicated. One thing, if we could have, like, if there was an organization of professionals that got together and they made like guides and like rules that could be put in place at businesses for how to investigate. If there was only a company that
Mm.
could help businesses with their HR problems, you know, wait a minute.
I was gonna say, I think HR.com, there's somebody that does this. I don't remember who it is.
Well, I just happened to find SHRM's own extensive guidance on how to conduct investigations of the workplace. This is what their materials say. Investigators should be neutral and objective.
Fail,
Fail. Investigators should not have a stake in the outcome.
fail,
Documentation should be thorough and contemporaneous.
double fail.
The complainant should be interviewed about their claims.
Yeah, fifth fail. I mean, it's insane. Insane. Not Go ahead, sorry.
The judge, the judge found that SHRM actually produced no facts showing that it actually investigated.
Pause.
Link.
Pause right there. That it actually investigated. Period, hard stop, next line. Like, that is the craziest thing. That's like, I don't know, I'm gonna make a karate joke. That's like a taekwondo instructor teaching you Brazilian jiu-jitsu. It just doesn't happen. Like, that doesn't happen. They know their taekwondo, they don't know jiu-jitsu, but somehow they just completely fail at taekwondo. Makes no sense.
Uh, Is it like a instructor at a swim school drowning?
I think, yeah, well, not only, yeah, an instructor at swim school letting his other instructor drown while teaching a class
On, yeah, how not to let people
on
down.
how to not drown.
It's just, it doesn't make any sense. I think, but I think the greater lesson really here is that um, it's so difficult to kind of tuck in your human instincts when dealing with human resource problems. I think really what was happening here behind the scenes is that you have this manager, Carrie Mills, or not Carrie Mills. I'm sorry, the Barley, Barley, the manager, just not liking Muhammad and gets together with this employee experience coordinator to figure out how they can fire her because they don't like her because she's maybe doesn't have the same interests as her, doesn't get along with her, or whatever. Maybe Mama just wants to do her job and not have any type of back and forth about their personal lives. And they get together and they get this other idiot, Mike Jackson, to come up with some emails that are going to set Muhammad up to get fired. And it's like you could you could be the best company on earth with the best intentions and the best programs and outlines and trainings and stuff like that, but people are not going to put through your policies. That's just what it is. No matter what you do, somebody is going to screw it up.
Yeah, and like you said, there could be a million reasons why this happened. I mean, it could be because Miss Muhammad was remote in Colorado and Miss Barley had to work physically in the office in Virginia. I mean, it could be because she doesn't like working from or remote employees because she can't do it herself or whatever. Could be a lot of reasons, and maybe there's nothing. Maybe there was just a colossal f up by Barley. I mean, who knows? It's insane though because you cannot, no matter who you are or what you do, from the top to the bottom, nobody can put away their personal proclivities and issues. And it just becomes to a bigger head when those people that need to put those aside for objective purposes, whether it be an organization or a person, in these situations. They can't, and it's worse when it's an organization like SHRM, who, again, I like SHRM. I will present for you in the future. A shameless plug. And it's a company that is responsible for it. It makes no sense, and you would think that all the money coming from the memberships and everything would go towards making sure you had a robust HR department.
Again, it's just people don't want to spend the money on the HR because it's not something that brings profit to the company. It's really hard to quantify how much money potentially you saved with good HR programs. How do you quantify? Well, we would have got sued 10 times if we didn't do this. It's really impossible. But this really goes to show you the importance of it because if the jury doesn't like your attitude, um, things can get very messy for you, as you can see. So, want to talk a little bit about the trial itself and just a little bit about like the technical aspects of the trial. The verdict that came back but for her race, this was the jury question, but for her race, would SHRM have terminated Muhammad? Jury answer was yes. Race discrimination proven. But for her complaints, would SHRM have terminated Muhammad? Yes, retaliation proven. They deliberated for about 4.5 hours. And one note that the jury sent was asking about punitive damages. So, what does that tell you a little bit about what was going on in that jury room?
It tells you that the jury hated SHRM and their witnesses. Like, it absolutely hated them. I mean, I looked at the verdict form, and it just says, what are the compensatories? 1.5 million. What are the punitives? 10 million. Like, this is, I guess, incredible. And I say that in the true definition of the word. And I think they only deliberated for like 4.5 hours.
That's
So yeah, what's that?
yeah, that's what I should say.
Yeah.
No, I don't
Did
listen to
you?
you when you're talking. I mean, what?
Oh, I was formulating my response. But yeah, the 4.5 hour thing kills me. Like, they didn't have to think a lot about that, right? I mean, they didn't have to think a lot about the jury, didn't have to think a lot about, like, really punishing SHRM for this. And if you think about it, I mean, maybe if you think about it, an HR company being on trial for HR is going to be made an example of. I mean, I think that makes sense. Like, if this was Coca-Cola, the same stuff happened to, or again, insert company here that's large, maybe it wouldn't have been that big. Maybe because the plaintiff really had the meat on the bone of, this is an HR company. Like, no matter what they say, they should know better, right? Like, they should know because they're the ones that are responsible for setting the rules and practices around the world for this. And the fact that they didn't do it just makes it worse. And I feel like maybe that's the basis for a lot of the punitives and for the jury to come back so quickly with such a large number.
And that's the important lesson is we were talking about reasonableness of what you have to do as a company, and that's really what you have to think about when you're faced with these situations as an employer. How big is my company? What is reasonable? What is like my revenue? Would a jury think, $10,000 would be a lot for a company like mine to conduct an investigation? Yeah, if you have 50, $60 million in revenue as a company, you're damn right the jury is going to expect you to spend $10,000 on an investigation. But if you're if you're a small vendor somewhere at a farmer's market, you're not going to have the same expectations for the rigor of your investigation process, say if there's a complaint like that. So, keep in mind very much what your identity is as a business and what people would expect from a business like yours.
I agree. I mean, I agree. And it's just crazy. It's just crazy. Like, this is the peek behind the HR curtain, right? You're seeing how movies are made now. Like, you're seeing what is it, the fourth wall? I mean, whatever reference you can make here, because this is what should never have happened. This never should have happened. This should have been something that I mean, again, if it was handled properly, this is something that SHRM should have presented something on.
So yeah, exactly. I mean, they here's the thing. People are gonna screw up in your organization, and you can pay, those victims some money to settle and get out of it. It's just part of doing business. That's something that you have to learn, and then you just fire barley later, and, you hope that doesn't happen in your organization again. It's not time to, like, build a fort, and pretend like, nobody's home, when people are complaining. So, just to give, let's I wanna do wrap up a little bit with a list of things that if you're an employer, you should think about if you're faced with a situation like this. First thing is use trained neutral investigators. The idiot that they brought in to do the investigation was also shadow supervising Mohammed as well while doing the investigation, because he was giving the manager ghostwriting her emails to Mohammed. So you can't do that. Also, don't have two people who are fighting with each other or having a personal conflict with each other when they're still emotional and angry into a meeting with each other. It's not going to go well, especially if you don't have HR people there, if you don't have like a conflict de-escalator there, which is also, the size of your company matters. And actually investigate. You have to have a real investigation with notes.
But the size of your company matters to an extent because there are, I'm sure, hundreds, if not thousands, of members of SHRM who would have come in, which actually might go to bias, but let's just pretend that didn't happen right now, who would come in and independently investigate, who get paid or not paid to come in and investigate this and to conduct de-escalation practices or conduct fairness interviews or whatever to handle. So there are a million different things they could have done to change, I guess, the bias and change like how they specifically did it. So sorry, going to your original point of it matters what size your company is. It does. But at the same time, is you should know better by hiring somebody to do something that I guess will assist the accused in terminating as opposed to having a neutral investigation.
One other interesting thing is that if this would have happened today, there was a new law in 2025 of discrimination based on combination of protected characteristics. So, in this case, she would be able to claim discrimination on the combination of being Egyptian and a woman, or Egyptian Arab and a woman. So that's an intersectionality. So that's something that the complaint, if it was filed today, could have been different in that sense. Um, the other thing that I wanted to talk about is, um oh, actually, you know what? No, I didn't want to talk about anything else.
Well, and just for the record, that's California, right? The intersectionality.
Yeah, that's just California only. This was a federal claim, but it's California only. And again, that's just something that makes things so confusing because California has now said that um, there are kind of these reading in between the lines, new classes of discriminatory classes based on a combination of factors. So if you're a woman and you don't speak English, that could be two things. If you're a man and you have medical problems, that's a new category right there by itself. It used to be you'd be a man and you were having sexual discrimination or gender based, and then it would be medical discrimination. Now you're wrapped up into like uh, one big category because I guess something like Asian women are discriminated against differently than Asian men. That's what the law is trying to stop. But again, this is just going to make things very difficult.
And just to kind of tie that to California a little bit more, the failure to investigate properly is a violation of FIHA itself or actionable, even if the underlying conduct isn't proven. So what you said earlier of, well, could have been different, could have been prevented, yes. But under the FIHA, failing to investigate could have been another remedy that plaintiff could have sought in California. And also in California, I know Title VII caps compensatory and punitive damages based on how big the employer is. The FIHA does not. So, I mean, I don't know if this could have been this reaches a cap. I didn't look specifically as to what the cap was, but the point being is that this could have been even bigger in California. So it's just again basic day one stuff.
Yeah, I mean, they screwed up so many ways here. They could have stopped this, and there probably wouldn't have been a lawsuit if they would have just been able to take care of this in a reasonable way and act like adults. But that's not what happens at work.
Yeah, agreed, agreed.
So yeah, 10 million, yeah, could have been much more than that. And well, I want to ask you this: do you think it's fair that there is this kind of like sliding scale of reasonableness? Do you think that a company like SHRM that holds themselves out to be an expert in HR should be held to a higher standard?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, they're the ones that were in charge of building the essentially the industry and built they specifically should have been the cornerstone of how to build an investigation process that is actually neutral and not just on paper. So I mean, I think that absolutely is right. I mean, is it a ground for appeal? Maybe. But again, they're the ones that established the principle. They're the ones that established the rules. They should be held to a higher standard. I mean, But then I guess turning it around to you, what are your thoughts? I mean, as a plaintiff's attorney, should they have been punished more?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that this is the best way to show the rest of the larger business community that these types of things are not acceptable at all. There's going to be people feeling like they're discriminated against, whether it's true or not. Whether your personal feelings as a manager tend to be that you don't believe the employee. That's not really up to you. You have to really respect people and take the responsibility as a business owner and or a HR person or a manager to conduct these investigations because people really give their lives to their jobs and it's the most important thing in their lives a lot of times and it can really destroy people when they're kind of treated as expendable and as just kind of um, incidental to larger plans of other people.
So what do we learn from this?
Don't start a business. That's like don't start a business. Like it's oh my god.
If I remember correctly, somebody from SHRM made a comment about how this was not a big deal.
Oh yeah, I think it was the CEO. It's not a big deal. I mean, when you're making that much money, 11 million is I guess it's not that big of a deal to him, and he didn't get fired. But um, yeah, again, we're a big shame society, but if I guess we're not necessarily a big consequence society because this guy still has his job, and it's just kind of weird that somebody fostering this type of atmosphere at a company can just be lording over such just unorganized, shitty procedures for trying to guarantee that their employees can work in a safe environment.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I have some closing remarks, but I want to jump to those unless you had more.
No, I got nothing. I'm just rambling.
That's okay. So I think this all teaches us a lesson to make sure companies, if you're an HR professional or a CEO or whatever, to review your own investigation procedures and make sure that you actually follow them. If you think there's any issue regarding neutrality or bias, hire an outside vendor. The bias of paying someone to investigate is much less than hiring, someone who might be getting paid monthly and worried about their job and actually helping the accused of things. So make sure you hire outside if you need to. Again, lawyers are even better. It might cost you some money, but I guarantee you hiring a lawyer to perform this investigation would not have cost $11.5 million plus
Yeah.
whatever.
There was uh, there was no references to general counsel. There was no references to, anybody calling a lawyer. And this is a legal issue. I think that's the biggest thing people don't realize. HR is a quasi legal department, if not an actual legal department.
Oh,
So
it absolutely is. I think we said a million times in the past, maybe less than a million, but a lot of times in the past that we're asking HR professionals to do the job of an attorney when a lot of times attorneys can't get things right. And I'm saying that about myself sometimes. I mean, laws,
it's hard.
especially yeah, in California, things change all the time. It's very complicated. It's very nuanced. It depends on the change of case law from decisions in certain courts. I mean, it's very complicated. So asking somebody who's already overwhelmed as an HR professional to do legal work or to be held accountable for legal work is not a good thing to do if you're a company.
Yeah, especially when they're busy planning pizza parties and birthdays and like finding out where like the filters for the air conditioning ducts are.
Yeah, in Maryland and hiring Marilyn Monroe impersonators to do solidarity birthday parties. I mean, HR is leaned on way too much for all these things. But we
Well,
have an episode about that, so in case you haven't listened to it, go back to it.
it's December 23rd right now. It's almost Christmas. I want to wish everybody happy holidays, happy Christmas, Merry Christmas, happy Hanukkah, and all that good stuff. Hope you have a happy and healthy 2026. And yeah, thank you so much for listening in. And take care. We'll see you soon.
Happy New Year, everybody.